We love telling great stories on Connections Radio, and mentoring and coaching is one of our big areas that we like to focus on, isn't it?
It is, and especially for me, I love the world around coaching. And I think today's guest is going to be a fascinating listen for our listeners, and one, as always, I'm really looking forward to.
Okay.
So it should be a fascinating 20 minutes or so.
Okay, well, on the line we have Elaine Frostman-Clarke. Elaine runs something called EFC Performance. Elaine, thanks for joining us on Connections Radio today. Good to talk to you.
Privileged to be here,
Bless you.
Glen and Ash. So
EFC Performance then, Elaine, tell us about it. What do you do at EFC Performance?
it's looking at 4 areas within an organisation, Glen. Over my years of being in sales and then eventually taking that leap of faith to run my business, I realised that it's behaviours that need to bring about a change of result within organisations. And I don't think there's enough emphasis put on, well, how do we address behaviours that need to be changed? So we focus on 4 key areas. The first one is, and we kick all of our programs off with this, which is behavioural profiling. And we use a tool called Everything Disc. I'm sure some of your listeners will be familiar with it. And that really is very pivotal to start that whole process of self-awareness around people's behaviours, but also the impact of their behaviours on others around them. The other thing that we then go on to do is look at how we can then coach either teams or individuals. So we offer one-to-one coaching. This is at an executive level. We also do team coaching. And the lovely thing about team coaching is that you're not only allowing people to do the observational learning bit, but by the same token, you are allowing them to understand how to become a coach. So they're playing both the role of the coach and the coachee, if that makes sense. The other thing we do is team dynamic days. So we reach out to intact teams who basically need a boot camp approach. Teams change, that's the very nature of teams. They change by the minute, by the hour, by the day, the month. They're constantly evolving. But there's a great guru that we build a lot of our programs around. He's an American guy called Patrick Lencioni, and he's wrote a lot of books around dysfunctional behaviour within teams. And it's based on a model looking at 5 core behaviours, which we can go into a bit later if you'd like. But he quotes, and it's quite profound this, he says that the single most competitive advantage today in modern organisations is teamwork. However, it remains as elusive as ever. And it's so true because...
Why is that?
I think it's because teams are made up of people.
Right.
By the very nature of teams being made up of people, it's always transitional. So teams they're either going forward or they're going back. It's very rare that they are plateaued, that they're constant. Because people change and therefore teams change. So, for example, you might have a very stable team, but things happen to people in their personal lives, and that inevitably then has an impact on that team and the people in that team. That person's behaviour might change. The impact of that behaviour might also affect others in the team. People leave teams, people join teams, people within teams want to move elsewhere in organisations. People become highly motivated and very demotivated in teams from time to time. So it's very fluid, it's very transitional. What we try to do with teams is give them the tools and the techniques, and again, we run profile reports specifically looking at team behaviours to raise the awareness of where are we today and where do we need to be and where's the gap and how do we help you with that gap in terms of tools and techniques to take away from any of our workshops to go and work on in a practical sense.
Are companies becoming more and more aware of this whole area of we need to sort of teach and coach our teams more? It seems more prevalent now than ever before.
I would absolutely concur with that. There's a big global consultancy group, McKinsey, who I'm sure plenty of people have heard of. We keep a close eye on McKinsey because they're very well versed on topical things around technological changes, but also changes around personnel. And you're probably aware there's a huge shift at the moment towards organisations having to transform to digitalisation, for example. The big problem with that is around the people involved in it. So what a lot of companies are struggling with, Glen, is to address the impact of change on people. Now, some of these digital programs, these shifts are huge. You know, they're many years long to get from where they are now to where they need to be. And there are people involved in that. And there are more and more people in the workplace now. There are more and more people setting up their own businesses. The stats prove that. And so that need to understand how to not only build the right team around you, but sustain high performance and really understand the people in that team. How do I work with them? Because they're all different. And I think, again, managers and leaders sort of make that assumption that, okay, I've got a team of 10, so I'll treat them all exactly the same. And therefore we have to work with the leader or the head of that team to get them to also understand that you cannot do a one-size-fits-all. These people are all very different. And again, using the report, that really highlights that everyone in your team is different, and therefore you have to adapt your behaviour to bring out the best in them. And you know, a high-performing team all pulling in the same direction, that is quite powerful.
Obviously, for a lot of companies, Glen's touched on this, I think we are becoming better. We're more open and understanding that the team and the individuals that make up that team are different people. They are unique. Have you ever come across a little bit of resistance when you go into larger organisations? And how do you as a company work around that possible resistance?
We do come across resistance. What we do very well, I think, Ash, is when we initially engage with the stakeholders, we're very thorough in how we screen companies. It's a bit like coaching, and you'll know this, Ash. You know, people tend to make this assumption around coaching that I can roll a coaching program out to the whole of my workforce. Well, actually, you can't, because coaching is very different to training. Training is very much that push mentality of information, and coaching is very much that pull. And for a whole variety of reasons, you might not have people on board with coaching. It's not that it's not for them, but it might not be for them at that time. They might be someone who really does struggle to put that mirror up to themselves in order to start raising the self-awareness. Where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Where do I not show up? Where am I really adding value? You know, for some people, these are very easy questions to answer, but for a lot of others, Ash, they're very difficult questions, and there can be a myriad of reasons for that. So going back to your question, we're very thorough in how we screen companies and individuals that we choose to work with. And what we won't do as a result of that screening process is walk into a situation where we're constantly pushing on a closed door. So people recognise that something needs to change. But then when we start to ask them questions about, well, how prepared are your people to work with us? Because this is going to be tough. You know, this is not an overnight fix. We're talking about senior people who've probably fallen into some pretty bad habits around managing and leading others. And so before we can start to fix the problem, we've got to undo the learning. That can be difficult. So if we feel that there's potential, there's a good fit with an organisation, then next thing we'll do is insist on meeting the team or the individuals that we're going to be working with. And again, from there, we get a very good feel as to whether people are up for some real change or whether it's a bit of lip service. It can never be 100%, of course, until we fully engage with the people that they want us to work with. But we feel that we've really got a good process in place now to be able to filter out the people that we're going to have problems with.
So typically then, Elaine, how long would you spend with a company or a group of individuals? You say it's not a quick fix, it's not an overnight sensation. How long would you be with a company, for example? I mean, I was looking at your list of portfolio here. You've got some great top-notch names: Rolls-Royce, Honeywell, Cisco, Hewlett-Packard, GWR Railways, massive, big companies these. I mean, how long would you spend with these companies?
Well, again, Glen, to really bring about sustainable change, that's the key, sustainable change. We won't engage with anyone for less than 12 months. You've got to have a blended approach, and by blended I mean it has to be a combination of face-to-face training workshops. It has to be a combination of coaching, of e-learning, so we want them to take some accountability and do some work behind the scenes in their own time possibly. We also set up communication groups, so WhatsApp groups, Zoom calls. Some have got their own communication platform, so we continue the dialogue between the groups once we've stepped away. We'll get them doing development plans. I mean, there's a whole series of things that come into our programs, but never less than 12 months. I spent some time before I set my business up working in a big global training organisation, which was fantastic.
So you've had some grounding in this then? You've had a real sort of base grounding in what you're doing now?
Yes, I'm an accredited coach. It took me 12 months to become an accredited coach. It was a very in-depth programme, and looking back, it was a fantastic programme. I started doing a little bit of coaching and started to get some traction as a sole trader. But people were inevitably saying to me, this is great, we're seeing some real results, but we'd like some training as well. I didn't feel I understood the dynamics of training well enough to be able to put a course together. I had no materials either, not for training. And so I went and joined a global training company for about 2.5 years. And because I'd come from an IT background, a sales IT background, I got put on some fantastic projects all over the world. And I really understood then how to design a training program, how to engage an audience, and all the components of that.
And that's the trick, is engaging an audience and having that skill to be able to do that and carry that off successfully.
And there's a real art to that. I think there's certain techniques that you can understand as a facilitator, as a trainer, but I think there's a real art in terms of your own character, your own personality, about how engaging you can be with people. And I honestly think, Glen, that my knowledge of using profiling tools and being a coach has helped me to be able to connect with people who operate on very different levels to me. So I feel just as comfortable sitting, having a one-to-one coaching session with someone at the absolute top of a business as I do with someone who is maybe at an exec level or someone who's just thinking about taking that step into setting their business up. But you're right, engagement is key, and that's why, going back to the question about, well, how long do we normally work with people? We make no apologies for the fact that if you want sustainable results, if you want change to be embedded, you've got to give this at least 12 months.
Okay, that seems very fair. Very shortly then, Elaine, we'll pause for a bit of music, but we'll perhaps talk about some of the areas on your website, some of your services, the one-to-one executive coaching, the disc profiling, which I'm fascinated by, and I know Ash is interested in that as well, the mastermind groups, and also the fact that you can take the disc profiling test as well. A great website. You're listening to, of course, our chat with our guest today, Elaine Frostman-Clarke. Elaine runs something called EFC Performance, helping you focus and change. Elaine, we're going to pause for a bit of music. We always like to offer a chance for our guests to choose a track that they really like and would love to hear on Connections Radio. So what's it going to be?
Well, I've got a very eclectic taste in music.
Good, I'm glad to hear.
Some would say bizarre.
Yeah, right.
A real hero of mine is Guy Garvey, obviously the frontman in Elbow. I think his view on the world is quite enlightening. He's a super guy to listen to and a fantastic artist. And so I've picked an Elbow track, and it's called Black and White.
Been climbing trees.
That was Elbow with Black and White, and you are here listening to Connections Radio with myself, Ashley Burgess Payne, and Glen Thompsett.
Yes.
We are with Elaine Frostman-Clarke of EFC Performance, and I'm interested and intrigued by this, Elaine. Disc profiling. What exactly is that for our listeners? And the reason I'm so intrigued is because I've actually taken a disc profile and I was shocked at how accurate
I'm going to take Elaine's, I think. I've not done one yet, so I'm going to do one with you, Elaine.
So as enthralled and intrigued as I am, I'm also scared by it, by how accurate it is.
Just out of curiosity, Ash, where did you come out? Can you remember?
I came out under I. Is it Influence?
Influence,
yes.
yeah.
And it was interesting, the whole process, because there's this thing at the start where you have to actually be truthful and sort of select who you are, not what the characteristics of what you think and want yourself to be. So, it was a very enlightening process.
I'm not surprised you came out as an I. If you just said to me, I'm about to take the test, where do you think I'll come? I would have plotted you as an I, and I'll explain the acronym. So DISC is a behavioural profiling tool. There's many tools like this out there in the marketplace, but I think if you look at any of the stats and the information around everything DISC, which is owned, by the way, by Wiley Publishing, who are a global publisher, you probably recognise them more for the dummies books they do, rugby for dummies, marketing for dummies. And they now own the whole algorithm, really, that sits behind DISC as a profiling tool. So what it's primarily aimed at uncovering is your core set of behaviours. So where do you really operate well? And DISC is an acronym for dominance, influence, steadiness and conscientiousness. Just to give you a quick snapshot, if you're profiled as a D, some of your key behaviours are you're very direct, very forceful, very assertive, very results focused, very task focused. If you come out as an I, the influencer, you're very sunny in your disposition, let's say. So you're great with words. You're very easy dealing with people, which is absolutely what you are, Ash. You're great at engaging with people. I know that from working with you.
Thank you, Elaine. I'll give you the money afterwards.
The S's, we call them the steady eddies in the nicest possible way. So they're quite reflective people, very people-focused, as are the influencers. They're very opposite to the D because the DISC model is a wheel. So you've got the 4 segments and the D's opposite to the S. So very different to the D's. Quite reflective, slow to change. So you've got to sell change to them in a very different way to you have the D's. Very loyal people, very harmonious. So whereas the D's, they tend to cause chaos. The S's...
Would I be a D, do you think, Elaine? What do you think?
Possibly.
Okay. I'll do it later.
If you've got a lot of D's in your team, then, it's nice to balance their chaos, their behaviour, with the tranquility and the harmonious approach of the S's. And then finally, the C's, the conscientious people, they are your analysts. So huge perfectionists. They, like the D's, they're more task-focused than people-focused. Very private people. They'd much sooner sit in a room looking at a spreadsheet than they would dealing with people's problems.
Know lots of people like that, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting, Glen, because before I did it, I suppose, the way of looking at this is if you had a football team, a lot of times business owners think, I'll surround myself with people similar to myself.
Yeah.
When you think of it as football, you wouldn't fill the 11 players with Cristiano Ronaldo, would you? So this whole process, Elaine, is just fascinating, isn't it? Because it highlights, I presume one of the benefits to a business owner is it highlights possible areas of strength, but also areas of potential weakness in their team.
It does, Ash. You're absolutely right. So when we run DISC reports, primarily we do them for a team and then we will pull them into a workshop. So we sort of build up through the morning about the behaviours that they observe of each other. We talk them through the model. So we really sort of ramp up the tension and then we have lunch. And then when they come back after lunch, we give them the reports. And your comment, Ash, about it's so accurate is very often the comment we get. People will sit there and we encourage them to read through it and check it with their marker pen or whatever, but inevitably they will turn around and say, I can't believe this is so accurate. Now, the reason it's so accurate, and this is why Everything DISC really is a market leader at the moment in terms of behavioural profiling tools. Wiley have poured lots and lots of investment into fine-tuning the algorithm. So how that works on a practical level, let's say the 3 of us were about to take the Everything DISC test today. So what happens is you will get an email, you click on the link and away you go. And as you said, Ash, you have to answer it very honestly or else there's no point.
Yeah.
It's answering it from the point of view of how you operate now. So in your current position, answer the questions that way. So what it would do, it would probably send all 3 of us the first 10 questions exactly the same. But then this is where it starts to get really clever. It then looks at how Ash and Glen and Elaine have answered those first 10 questions. And it's starting to think, okay, Glen's answered them sort of in a more of a D style than Elaine and Ash have. I'm an I as well, Ash. It will then churn out the next possibly 5 questions to Glen, which would be very different to myself and Ash. And that's where it gets very clever. So you won't have the same 30 or 40 questions sent out to everyone in that team. Hence the reaction. People sit there, they're convinced that we've hijacked their partners or something and made them write these reports because they're so very true to form. Yeah. And what the report does, it not only highlights you as a person, so where you operate well, maybe where you've got some blind spots, but it goes on to talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, and more importantly, towards the back of the report, and this is where it can be used at a very practical level, it starts to highlight you working with other people. So Ash, you're an I. It will give you at the back of that report some very practical things to think about and do when you're engaging with a D, with an S or with a C.
That's where it was really effective for me within the workplace, because I started to understand, which I'm sure you'll come on to, how I interact with my fellow co-workers. It just led to greater efficiency and effectiveness.
That's right. So there are some really practical things that you can do and think about. So let's say next time you were in a meeting, Ash, and you've got someone who's very opposite to you. In your case, it's the C's, it's the analysts, the people who are very meticulous, very thorough. Now, if you're anything like me as an I, that's not my forte. I'm not that detailed.
Not mine either.
I'm not that detailed person. I'm much better now, and I'm much better when I'm engaging with those people because I understand their objectives, their agendas, their view of the world through the help of DISC. And it is very practical to help people who are struggling with fellow team members, for example, or managers who are trying to manage people very opposite to them. That's a very common challenge and objective that we hear from managers and very senior leaders. I'm managing 300 people. Half of them are the other side of the globe, and their culture, their demeanour, their way of operating is very different to ours. DISC is a great way to kick that whole process off for that person to understand the people they are dealing with at a much deeper level.
So when you go into a company to do your coaching and everything that you do, that you say on your website, Elaine, DISC profiling is one of the first things you get everybody to take part in.
Yeah,
right.
That's the first thing that we insist on people doing. And there are many different types of reports that we can run, Glen. So there's a generic one that you can run across the whole of a business called Workplace. You may have done that one, Ash, when you did your profile. But you can then scale it up. So there's one specifically for salespeople. There's one aimed predominantly at managers. There's also a very senior one called Work of Leaders, and that looks at 3 key areas where very senior people in an organisation should be operating and focusing on. And that is around creative vision, so creating goals, that forward-thinking approach, how you align that vision then throughout the whole of the organisation, and then the very key part is the execution of that plan. How do you plan to do that? So that's quite a meaty report, as you can imagine. But then there's 360s that you can do through DISC reports. You can also run culture reports. So that will look at how everyone in that team or several teams across the business has profiled, and it will pull together a report. So it might be that you've profiled 60 people, and predominantly they're coming out in the I part of DISC. So the culture report starts to talk about, okay, if you have an organisation with an I-type culture, what does that mean? Inevitably, it's going to talk about some of the blind spots, which are attention to detail. How is that showing up then in this organisation? You can do team reports, you can do comparison reports. They're very interesting. So let's say, Glen and Ash, they weren't getting on particularly well.
So, how do you know? We get on like a house on fire.
Glen.
House on fire.
Cut me deep there.
No, we get on really well, don't I? I'm just doing that for the radio.
And I thought we were friends.
just doing that for the radio.
Let's just imagine then, just for the radio, that you weren't getting on particularly well.
Okay.
Providing you've both gone through a DISC profile of some sort, we can then pull a comparison report. So it looks at how Glen should work with Ash and how Ash should work with Glen. And it's really interesting because, again, it's very practical, Ash, as you were saying, it makes you look at some very practical things you need to be doing with each other, different conversations you need to be having, and a different level of awareness of how the other person works. And it shows up in certain situations.
That's very true. I used to send quite lengthy emails, really enthusiastic, to someone at work about, how we can move things forward and we can do this and we can do that. And they were too long because obviously they came out as a D and all they wanted was short, brief, to the point, And once I established that, my line of communication with that particular person was much more effective for both of us as individuals and for the firm as well.
So that worked for you then?
Oh, massively so. It's something I honestly believe that all businesses should invest their time in.
So, Elaine, here's the scenario, okay? I run a company with 30 people. We're not doing brilliantly. I mean, I'm partly down maybe to the economic atmosphere, economic times at the moment, but I feel I could get more out of my workforce. I'm looking at your website. What's the first process? Obviously, to make initial contact with you, but what do you then do? Do you come in and sort of talk to my sort of HR department, if I've got one? If I haven't got one, I don't know where you go. What's the process?
There's many ways that you can contact us via the website. There's a general info email, and we've got our contact phone number. We're also very active on social media, on LinkedIn. We run many webinars. Off the back of those webinars, we very often do a nice sort of package of coaching and profiling tools. But if you just want to contact us from the website, then it's very, very easy to get in touch with us. Once we pick up either your voicemail or your email, it's usually myself that makes that first call. So as I said earlier, what we would then aim to do is either connect with you over the phone or face-to-face, whichever is easier.
And you'll travel anywhere in the country for this, will you? Go anywhere?
Anywhere in the world,
Anywhere
Glen.
in the world?
Okay. I was out in the US just before Christmas last year with a client of ours. They've got a team out there in the US, and we've been doing some extensive work with them. So, yeah, we have a global footprint. A lot of the facilitators in our team, they've worked extensively on global projects. So I would have that initial conversation, really understand the commitment and also the scale of the challenges that company have. And then I'd probably want to meet the team involved or the individuals involved who are maybe not performing or they have the particular challenges that the stakeholder is talking about. And then we would scope out a program based on our experience of dealing with similar types of businesses, similar challenges, and we would sit down with the stakeholders and really point out the benefits of engaging with us for a blended program. But you're absolutely right, Glen, going right back to your comment earlier, everything starts with behavioural profiling. We would choose the level of profiling that we needed to kick the whole process off with, and that really allows us, as the outside company looking to help whoever we need to help, a real insight into the people we're going to be dealing with and some of the challenges. Straight away we can see where some of these pockets of conflict may be, or lack of communication or lack of performance, which inevitably affects revenues and productivity.
Loads we could talk about, but sadly, Elaine, time is up against us. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. If anybody wants any more information about you, give us your website and details again, Elaine.
You can contact us through the website. The website is all the W's, efcperformance.com. And on the website, there's also an email that you can drop us, just a general inquiry, even if it's I'm curious, can you give us a call? That's fine. And the general inbox is info@efcperformance.com.
And the thing I love about this, Glen, is that it's all about people.
Yeah.
And as it says on Elaine's website, I mean, a company or a business's biggest resource and best asset
is its people.
Exactly. And really, really think it's such a fascinating area. So thank you very much for your time, Elaine. It's been, as I say, fascinating.
You're very welcome. And thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure.